So picture this. It's the winter of 1502. The citizens of this small Italian city wake up to a completely gruesome display in their public square.
Right, just a horrific scene.
Yeah. A powerful minister, a guy named Ramiro d'Orco, has literally been hacked in half. His body parts are just, left in the cold morning air with a bloody knife lying right beside them.
It's chilling.
Totally chilling. And the man who ordered the spectacular, terrifying execution was Cesare Borgia, who was actually d'Orco's own boss.
Which is the crazy part.
Exactly. And according to, one of the most infamous books ever written, this wasn't just some brutal random murder. It was a masterclass in textbook leadership.
Yeah, that's a wild claim.
So welcome to another deep dive. We are so glad you are here with us, especially you, the learner, because today you are tackling something truly foundational.
We're getting into the heavy stuff today.
We really are. Our mission today is to look at a 1513 manual on power, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, along with his biographical sketch, The Life of Castruccio Castracani of Lucca. And we want to strip away all those centuries of baggage attached to the word Machiavellian. Look past that villainous caricature and see what the text actually says about the raw, pragmatic, and honestly shocking psychology of power and leadership. So, okay, let's unpack this.
What's fascinating here is, it's the context of the mind behind that psychology. Machiavelli wasn't some cartoon supervillain sitting in a dark tower stroking a cat.
Right, he was a real guy.
Yeah, he was a Florentine diplomat, a civil servant who lived through this incredibly turbulent, bloody time in Italian history. His republic collapsed, the Medici family seized power, and he was actually tortured and exiled.
Wow. Tortured and exiled.
Yeah. So when he sits down to write this manual, he isn't writing about how the world ought to be. He leaves all that idealistic philosophy to the ancient Greeks.
He's grounded in reality.
Exactly. He is writing about a messy mechanical reality. It's kind of like looking at the human immune system. It doesn't care about morality or fairness, right?
Right.
It only cares about neutralizing threats and keeping the host body alive.
That's a great way to put it. And he starts his observation right at the moment when that political body is most vulnerable to infection, which is the acquisition of new power.
Right, the takeover.
Yeah. He talks specifically about this concept of mixed principalities, which is basically the scenario where a ruler adds a brand new territory to their existing domain. And he notes this fascinating, almost tragic quirk of human psychology.
Oh, it's so tragic.
People will eagerly take up arms and willingly change their rulers, operating under this assumption that, things are going to get better.
But the reality is they almost always go from bad to worse.
Right.
Machiavelli points out the structural inevitability of this disappointment, because when you take over a new territory, you have to bring your military.
You bring new taxes, new laws.
Exactly. New disruptions. You immediately offend the people you conquered. And simultaneously, you disappoint the allies who actually helped put you in power.
Because they want a massive reward.
Right. And you can never actually satisfy those outsized expectations. So boom, you are instantly surrounded by resentment.
Which brings us to this brutally foundational rule in the text for managing that resentment. The manual dictates that people must be handled with extreme precision.
Precision is the exact word for it. He writes that men ought either to be well treated or crushed.
Crushed. It is such a visceral word to use in a manual for governing.
It is visceral, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's based on this chillingly rational calculation about human nature. He argues that people will absolutely avenge themselves for light injuries.
Like getting fined or something.
Exactly. If you find a prominent citizen or strip them of some minor title, you haven't removed their ability to fight back. You've only given them a reason to do so.
You just made them mad.
Right. They will harbor that grudge, bide their time, and wait for a moment of weakness to strike. But, and here's the dark part, if you inflict a serious, devastating injury, if you completely ruin them, they lose the capacity to retaliate. So the logic dictates that any injury a leader inflicts must be so total and severe that the leader never has to stand in fear of revenge.
That sounds incredibly difficult to enforce on a macro level, though, especially when you're acquiring a foreign territory with totally different customs.
It is tricky, yeah.
But the text gets very specific about how to maintain that control. He says the absolute best option is for the new ruler to physically go and live in the newly conquered territory.
Which makes sense. You're right there to handle things.
Right. But as a second option, he suggests sending in colonies. He claims colonies are cheap and they only offend a tiny minority of the population who are left too poor and scattered to retaliate.
Yeah, the colony strategy.
But wait, let's think about this in the context of a modern corporate takeover or a merger, if I buy out a rival company, my instinct wouldn't be to just plant a few isolated colonies of my people. I'd want to send in a massive occupying force, right?
Not like your whole executive team.
Exactly. My entire executive suite just to police every single department and ensure total compliance. Isn't an occupying garrison much safer than a few colonies?
It feels safer on paper. But Machiavelli dissects the economics of power to prove that an occupying garrison is actually a catastrophic vulnerability.
Really? How so?
Well, if you send in an occupying army, or in your example, a massive suite of new executives, it consumes all the income of that new state.
Oh, because you have to pay them all.
Right. The acquisition immediately turns into a financial loss. But worse than the money is the psychological toll.
The friction.
Yeah, the constant shifting of a military presence up and down the territory, the daily friction of occupation, it exasperates the entire population. Everyone feels the hardship.
So everyone hates you.
Everyone becomes an enemy. And those enemies remain in their own homes, fully capable of organizing against you.
So garrison unites the population against you out of shared misery.
Precisely. A colony, on the other hand, is surgical. You only confiscate the land and homes of a very small fraction of the population to give to your new colonists.
And those people are ruined.
Right. Those few displaced people are financially ruined and geographically scattered, meaning they have zero political power to organize a rebellion.
And everyone else?
The rest of the population is left unharmed.
Yeah.
So they remain quiet, terrified that if they step out of line, they will be the next ones to lose their homes. It is maximum psychological leverage for minimum financial cost.
Okay, wow. So you've navigated the internal politics, you've acquired this new territory and set up your surgical colonies to keep the locals terrified but docile.
Yeah.
But what happens when an outside force decides they want a piece of your new territory? Machiavelli emphasizes that a ruler needs a solid foundation, which he defines as good laws and good arms.
Yes, good laws and good arms.
But he makes a massive distinction about the type of arms you use, doesn't he?
This is arguably one of the most critical warnings in the entire book. Machiavelli has an absolute disdain for outsourced power. He specifically targets mercenaries and auxiliaries.
Because they're just fighting for a paycheck.
Exactly. We all know mercenaries are soldiers you pay to fight for you, but he breaks down the lethal economic flaw in that arrangement. He describes them as ambitious, undisciplined, and fundamentally unfaithful.
Valiant among friends, cowardly before enemies.
Right. And the mechanism driving this behavior is the stipend. A standard paycheck is enough motivation to make a man willing to kill, but is never enough motivation to make him willing to die for you.
That economic calculation is just devastatingly simple. I mean, if their primary goal is to collect the paycheck, their primary incentive is to stay alive, to spend it.
Exactly. And he provides a fantastic piece of historical evidence for this. He points to King Charles VIII of France, who was essentially allowed to march into Italy and seize it with chalk in hand.
I love that phrase, chalk in hand.
Yeah, the historical joke is that Charles didn't even have to draw his sword. His officers literally just walked through the cities using chalk to mark the doors of the houses where their soldiers would sleep.
Because the Italians didn't fight back.
Right. Italy was easily conquered because the Italian city-states had relied on mercenary armies for decades. The moment a genuine life-or-death threat appeared at the border, the mercenaries simply folded or fled.
And if mercenaries are bad, he says auxiliaries are a total death sentence, which auxiliaries are troops that you borrow from a powerful ally, right?
Yeah, and they are far more dangerous than mercenaries. A mercenary might be cowardly, but an auxiliary army is unified and completely obedient to someone else. Machiavelli warns that if you use an ally's army and they lose the battle, your state is ruined. But if they actually win the battle for you, you are now their captive.
Because you just let a foreign army win a war inside your borders.
You have invited a fully functional, victorious foreign army into your territory. Good luck getting them to leave.
So relying on outsourced power is essentially building your entire house on someone else's foundation. The second they decide to pull the rug out, you collapse.
Absolutely.
If we pull this into the modern era, you can see the exact same mechanic when a business relies entirely on outside consultants or contractors for their core competency. Like if a tech company outsources all its actual coding, they lose control of their destiny.
Yes. If the contractors fail, the product dies.
And if the contractors succeed wildly, they hold all the leverage. They can dictate the terms or just walk away with the IP.
It maps flawlessly. His ultimate lesson is radical self-reliance. To hold power, you must have your own arms, your own loyal forces, your own internal competencies. You just cannot outsource survival.
Okay, but even if you have your own perfectly loyal troops to protect you from rival nations, you still have an internal population to manage. You have to control the minds of the people living inside your borders.
This brings us to the famous question.
The age-old question, probably the most famous concept associated with Machiavelli, is it better to be loved or feared?
Yeah, and his answer just strips away all romanticism and looks at the bare mechanics of human behavior. He acknowledges that, sure, it would be ideal to be both loved and feared.
That's pretty hard to pull off.
Almost impossible.
Yeah.
So, since you can't have both, it is infinitely safer to be feared. This stems from his rather bleak assessment of human nature. He basically describes men in general as ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and greedy.
Tell us how you really feel, Niccolò.
Right? He says, as long as you are succeeding and providing for them, they are entirely yours. But the moment the geopolitical weather turns bad, they will abandon you.
Because love is just a psychological construct.
Exactly. Love is maintained by a bond of obligation. Because humans are inherently driven by self-interest, they will break that bond of obligation the exact second it becomes profitable or safe to do so.
But fear is different.
Fear operates on a completely different psychological axis. Fear is maintained by a dread of punishment that never fails. A ruler cannot control whether the people love him. That depends on the people.
Right.
But a ruler can control whether the people fear him. A wise leader relies entirely on the levers they can pull themselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. There is a massive caveat to this. A golden rule of fear that completely redefines what it means to be Machiavellian.
The boundary line.
Yeah. He explicitly states that a ruler must be feared without being hated, because fear and hatred are two distinctly different emotional states, and hatred is fatal to a regime.
Totally fatal.
So how do you inspire dread without inspiring hatred? He gives two very specific boundaries. Keep your hands off their women, and absolutely keep your hands off their property.
That leads to one of those piercing psychological observations in the text. He writes, men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony.
That is just brutal.
But it makes sense.
It makes complete sense from a sustained psychological perspective. Think about it. If a ruler executes a citizen for treason, the family will grieve, but the trauma eventually fades into the past.
Life goes on. Right. However, if a ruler confiscates their estate, their generational wealth, the family wakes up every single day and physically experiences the economic deprivation caused by that ruler.
The wound never closes.
The resentment compounds daily.
Let me explore how a ruler navigates that resentment, because Machiavelli's advice on how to dispense injuries versus benefits sounds exactly like modern crisis PR management.
Oh, it really does.
He advises that if a leader must commit injuries or hand down harsh policies, they should do them all at one time so they offend less. But benefits and favors should be handed out little by little so their flavor lasts longer.
Yeah, stretch out the good stuff.
Wait, hold on. Is public memory really that pliable? Like, you're suggesting a leader can just drop a sledgehammer of draconian laws on a Tuesday, and as long as they hand out a few tax breaks over the next year, the public will just adapt?
According to the mechanics of the text, yes. Because human perception is governed by climatization. If a leader drags out punishments, inflicting a little bit of pain every week, the population lives in a state of perpetual terror and anxiety.
They never settle down.
Exactly. They never feel a sense of security, so they remain agitated and dangerous. But if you execute all your harsh, unpopular measures in one massive, swift stroke.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes. The initial shock is severe, but it quickly passes. A new baseline of normalcy sets in. And once that new baseline is established, you can slowly dole out favors. You neurologically condition the population to associate your leadership with a steady, predictable trickle of positive reinforcement.
Which brings us perfectly back to the story we started with, the manipulation of memory, perception, and violence. It's that gap between what a leader actually is and what they appear to be.
Chapter 18.
Right. Machiavelli dedicates chapter 18 to this theatricality of power, famously using the metaphor of the fox and the lion.
He argues that there are two ways of fighting in this world. By law, which is the method of men, and by force, which is the method of beasts.
Okay.
Because the laws of men are frequently insufficient to survive the treacherous political landscape, a prince must know how to tap into the nature of the beast. But not just one beast.
Right. He specifically says you must be a fox to discover the snares and traps, and a lion to terrify the wolves.
Yes.
Because a leader who relies strictly on the lion, just raw, roaring brute force, is politically blind. They will walk right into an ambush.
Exactly. Machiavelli points to Pope Alexander VI, asserting that the man did nothing but deceive people. He never kept his word, yet he always succeeded because he understood this gullible, surface-level aspect of mankind.
He knew how to play the game.
Right. And Machiavelli makes this incredibly bold claim here. He says a leader doesn't need to actually possess virtuous qualities, like being merciful, faithful, humane, or deeply religious.
Yeah.
But they absolutely must appear to have them.
Appearances are everything.
Because the masses are always captivated by appearances and by the final outcome. The vulgar crowd only sees the result. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly explains the horrifying genius of Cesare Borgia and Ramiro Dorco that you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of that public execution. Borgia acquires the Romagna region. It's totally lawless, full of robberies and chaos.
It's a total mess.
Borgia knows he needs the lion, so he appoints Dorco, a notoriously swift and cruel minister, and gives him absolute authority. Dorco uses extreme severity and completely pacifies the region.
He does the dirty work.
Right. But Borgia knows that this sheer brutality has made Dorco deeply hated by the public. And Borgia's overarching goal is to be feared, but not hated.
So what does he do?
He has Dorco cut in half in the public square.
And the text notes that this barbarous spectacle left the people satisfied and dismayed.
Satisfied and dismayed.
That psychological combination is the holy grail of Machiavellian control. The public was satisfied because the man who oppressed them was dead, and they were dismayed by the sheer, incomprehensible power of the ruler who ordered it.
So he outsourced the necessary cruelty to a subordinate, reaped all the structural benefits of a pacified state, and then dramatically executed the subordinate to take credit for delivering justice.
He was the lion when he unleashed Dorco, and he was the fox when he executed him.
It's dark, but the strategic architecture is flawless. Yet, here is the ultimate tragedy of Cesare Borgia. He laid these perfect foundations. He played the fox and the lion beautifully, and he still lost his empire.
He did.
Why? Because of the one variable that no amount of political machinery can completely control: fortune.
Fortune, luck, the chaotic unpredictability of the universe. Machiavelli wrestles deeply with this. He concludes that fortune governs roughly half of our actions, leaving us free will and ability to direct the other half.
And he uses this incredible metaphor of a raging river. He says fortune is like a catastrophic flood that sweeps away trees and buildings.
Not a raging river, yeah.
When it's raging, everyone flees before it. No one can stop it. But the crucial insight is that in fair weather, men can build barriers, dams, and canals. So when the river inevitably floods again, the water is channeled and its force is contained.
Preparation is the only antidote to chaos. He also employs an analogy heavily influenced by the gender dynamics of the 16th century, comparing fortune to a woman who favors the young, the adventurous, and the impetuous over the cautious.
Fortune favors the bold.
Exactly. The underlying philosophy is about adaptability and momentum. The world is constantly shifting. A ruler who adapts his methodology to the spirit of the times will thrive, while one who rigidly clings to old strategies will be ruined. More often than not, audacious, bold action overcomes cautious hesitation.
Okay, so to build those metaphorical dams during fair weather, a leader requires brilliant advisors. Machiavelli categorizes human intellect into three distinct tiers. First, those who comprehend things entirely by themselves.
The geniuses.
Right. Second, those who can appreciate and understand what others comprehend. And third, those who can do neither. A leader at least needs that second type of intellect to evaluate the strategies their counsel presents. But here's my question.
Lay it on me.
Courts, boardrooms, and executive suites are notoriously packed with yes-men and flatterers. If a leader tells their inner circle, "You have total free rein to tell me the blunt, unvarnished truth," don't they instantly lose that aura of distance, fear, and authority we just established was so important?
They absolutely do. Machiavelli warns that if everyone can tell you the truth, respect completely vanishes.
So how do you get good advice?
To maintain both clear intelligence and supreme authority, he prescribes a highly controlled middle path. You do not grant free speech to everyone. You select only a few highly capable wise men.
Just a tight inner circle.
Right. And you give only them the liberty to speak the truth. And crucially, they are only allowed to speak the truth on the specific topics you ask them about and nothing else.
Oh, wow.
You ask the questions, you absorb their unvarnished reality, and then you retreat and make your own final resolution. You govern the council. You never let the council govern you.
Okay, so we've covered the theoretical machinery, the fox, the lion, the economics of fear, building dams against fortune. But Machiavelli actually provides a biographical case study to prove these mechanics function in the real world, the life of Castruccio Castracani.
Yeah, Castruccio is the embodiment of Machiavelli's thesis. He illustrates the concept that great men often rise from complete obscurity, proving that personal ability and alignment with fortune play a much larger role in success than noble bloodlines.
His origin story is pure folklore. He was found as an abandoned infant in a vineyard, right?
Yeah, abandoned in a vineyard by a priest's sister. He was adopted and meant to study for the priesthood, but he completely rebelled.
Or wasn't having it.
Not at all. He was naturally drawn to weapons, sports, and the military arts, eventually being taken in by a prominent soldier.
But his rise to power wasn't just about being good with a sword. It was marked by a deep strategic cunning. He engineered advantages by manipulating the psychology of his opponents.
Right. The battle of Monte Carlo against the Florentines is the perfect example of this.
It's a masterstroke of deception.
It really is. Castruccio analyzed the enemy commander and realized the man was strictly adhering to standard military doctrine, placing his best, most reliable troops in the center and his weaker troops on the flanks.
Standard formation.
Exactly. So Castruccio completely inverted his own formation to set a psychological trap. He put his absolute best fighters on his wings and his weakest troops in the center.
A total reversal.
And when the battle commenced, he ordered his weak center to hang back and march at a crawl, while his elite flanks rushed forward at full speed.
Of course, this raises an important question about how we perceive engagement in conflict. Because Castruccio didn't just move bodies around a field, he manipulated space to neutralize the enemy's greatest asset.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
By holding his center back, the enemy's elite central troops were left swinging at air. They had no one to fight. Meanwhile, Castruccio's elite flanks slammed into the enemy's weak flanks and utterly decimated them.
He used the enemy's rigid expectations against them. He was the fox in his planning and the lion in his execution.
Exactly. And he went on to use extreme political deception, corrupting rival families in Lucca to install himself as prince, all while maintaining the fierce loyalty of his own troops.
Castruccio adapted to the times. He employed brutal force when necessary, utilized deception when it offered leverage, and constructed a fearsome reputation that brought him supreme regional power.
He proved the theory.
His life is the proof of concept for the brutal mechanics outlined in The Prince.
So what does this all mean for you? If you're listening out there, we've stripped the machinery of power down to its bolts today. The Prince isn't a manifesto for cartoon villains.
Definitely not.
It is an unfiltered, rigorously unsentimental lens on how human beings operate under pressure. It emphasizes the necessity of self-reliance, controlling your own foundation. It demands psychological pragmatism, understanding that it is structurally safer to be feared than loved. And it requires a mastery of perception, knowing when the situation calls for the cunning of the fox and when it requires the terrifying force of the lion.
And regardless of what industry you are in, these are enduring patterns of human behavior. Understanding how people digest sudden policy changes versus gradual benefits, or how they react to the loss of status or property, and how easily perception can be engineered, that is incredibly potent knowledge.
Extremely potent.
Whether you are navigating a high-stakes corporate negotiation, analyzing global political shifts, or just trying to understand the underlying dynamics of a complex organization, knowing how the levers of power actually function gives you a distinct, unshakable advantage.
I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on, something that builds on the deep irony of this text's history. Machiavelli poured his entire genius into this manual. He codified the absolute rules for manipulating power, mastering fortune, and winning favor.
Yeah, he wrote the ultimate playbook.
And he compiled it all into a little book designed specifically as a resume. He wrote it to get a job in the government of Lorenzo de' Medici. But historical records suggest Lorenzo never even bothered to read it. He certainly never offered Machiavelli a job.
The architect of ultimate control couldn't control his own career.
Exactly. Was the ultimate master of strategy simply outmaneuvered by the raging river of fortune? Or is there a definitive limit to how far sheer calculated pragmatism can actually take a person when the universe simply decides to look the other way?
That's a great question.
It's a reminder that you can understand exactly how every gear in the machine works, but you still can't command the weather. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.